I was sitting at my parents' dining table, fork halfway to my mouth, when my brother Brandon dropped the bomb. "Mom and Dad said I'm moving into your house," he announced with that smirk I'd grown to hate over 32 years. Everyone nodded like this was already decided. My stomach dropped, but I stayed calm. I set down my fork, took a slow breath, and said the words that would change everything. "Funny, I sold it last week." His face went white. I reached into my purse, pulled out the closing documents, and slid them across the table. The silence was deafening. "Let me back up 3 months so you understand how we got here. My name is Althea, and I'm 32 years old. I work as a project manager at a tech company in Austin, Texas. It's a good job, one I worked hard to get after putting myself through college with loans I'm still paying off. 5 years ago, I bought my 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood near downtown. It wasn't big or fancy, but it was mine. Every square foot represented overtime hours, skipped vacations, and careful budgeting. I was proud of that house. My younger brother Brandon is 28. He's never held a stable job for more than 8 months. He dropped out of college twice, both times after my parents paid his tuition in full. I had to take out loans for my education, but Brandon got a free ride, twice, and he wasted both chances. Our parents, Gerald and Patricia, have always favored Brandon. I noticed it early. When Brandon turned 16, they bought him a brand new Honda Civic with a bow on top. When I turned 16, I got a card with $50 inside. I bought my first car at 19 with money I saved from working 2 part-time jobs while attending community college. They paid for Brandon's college attempts without hesitation. When I asked for help with my student loans after graduation, Dad said I needed to learn financial responsibility. The irony was not lost on me. 3 months before that family dinner, Brandon lost his 7th job in 4 years. He'd been working at an electronics store and got fired for showing up late repeatedly. He got evicted from his apartment 2 weeks later for unpaid rent. He moved back in with Mom and Dad, sleeping in his old childhood bedroom at age 28. I noticed Mom acting strange during our weekly phone calls. She'd start sentences and then trail off. She'd mention family discussions but claimed I was always busy when they happened. I work normal hours. I'm never too busy for a scheduled call. But I brushed it off, figuring she was stressed about having Brandon back home. 2 months before the dinner, things got weirder. Dad would call and ask random questions about my house. Did I ever think about downsizing? Had I considered the costs of maintaining a larger home alone? Was I happy there? I answered honestly. I loved my house. I had no plans to move. The conversations felt odd, but I didn't connect the dots. Now, sitting at that dinner table, with the closing documents in front of my parents and Brandon, the dots connected with painful clarity. Brandon's face went from pale to red. He slammed his hand on the table. "Are you kidding me right now? This is unbelievable. You sold the house without telling anyone?" I met his eyes calmly. "It's my house, Brandon. I don't need permission to sell my own property." Dad cleared his throat, his jaw tight. "Althea, this is very inconvenient. We've been planning this for 2 months. 2 months, I repeated slowly. You've been planning my brother moving into my house for 2 months and nobody thought to include me in this conversation?" Mom started crying. Those weren't real tears. I'd seen her real tears exactly 3 times in my life. These were her manipulation tears, the ones she used to get her way. "Sweetheart, you've always been so difficult about family matters. We knew you'd make this complicated, so we decided to present it as a done deal." "Make it complicated," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "By wanting to be consulted about my own home?" Brandon leaned forward, his voice dripping with entitlement. "The plan was simple, Althea. I'd live in your house rent-free while I get back on my feet. You'd keep paying the mortgage and utilities. It's a 3-bedroom house and you live alone. It's selfish to keep all that space to yourself when family needs help." I stared at him. And where exactly was I supposed to live in this plan? Mom waved her hand dismissively. "We found you a nice 1-bedroom apartment across town. It's much more affordable. You'd save money. and Brandon would have space to figure things out. Let me get this straight, I said, looking around the table. I was supposed to move out of my house, continue paying for it, and let Brandon live there for free, all without anyone asking me first? Dad's face reddened. Family helps family, Althea. We raised you better than this. Something in me snapped. You raised me to work hard, pay my own way, and stand on my own 2 feet. I bought that house with my money. I made the mortgage payments. I fixed the leaky roof last year. I replaced the water heater. Where was Brandon when I needed help with any of that? Brandon laughed bitterly. Here we go with the martyr act. Before I could respond, Mom reached into her purse. Since you're being unreasonable, she said, pulling out a folded paper, maybe this will remind you that you already agreed. She unfolded the document and placed it on the table. It was a family agreement form, typed up to look official. At the bottom was my signature, except I never signed it. I picked up the paper, studying the signature. It was close, but the loop on the A was wrong. The tail on the H was too short. Someone had practiced my signature and done a decent job, but not perfect. This is forged, I said quietly. That's ridiculous, Dad blustered. You signed it 3 weeks ago. I pulled out my phone and took a picture of the document. I'm reporting this to the police. Forgery is a crime. Brandon lunged forward, trying to grab my phone. Give me that! My cousin Mason, who'd been silent until now, stood up and blocked Brandon. Don't touch her. The room erupted. Mom sobbed louder. Dad shouted about disrespect. Brandon called me names I won't repeat. But through it all, I felt eerily calm. I'd spent my whole life trying to be the good daughter, the reliable one, the peacemaker, and this was how they repaid me. My Aunt Carol, Mom's sister, finally spoke. She'd been sitting quietly at the end of the table. I knew about this plan, she said softly. Patricia called me 3 weeks ago and asked if I'd help convince you. I told her it was wrong. I told her to talk to you directly, but she said you'd just say no and ruin everything for Brandon. I looked at Carol, feeling another layer of betrayal. You knew and didn't warn me? She had the decency to look ashamed. I should have. I'm sorry. Brandon sneered at me across the table. You owe this family, Althea, after everything we've done for you. I stood up, gathering my purse. Everything you've done for me? Let me think. You paid for your own college. Oh wait, that was me. You bought your own car. No, that was also me. You paid for your own wedding 3 years ago that your parents actually attended and supported. Nope, that was me too. And you barely showed up. I was married once, to a man named Tyler. It lasted 2 years before he left me for someone else. During the divorce, I had to buy out his half of the house. It nearly bankrupted me. My parents never called to check on me during that time. Brandon never asked if I was okay. But when Brandon needed anything, I was expected to drop everything. Mom gasped. How can you bring up ancient history at a time like this? Ancient history? The divorce was finalized 14 months ago. Brandon laughed cruelly. You're playing the victim card hard today. That's when I decided to drop my own bomb. I know why I really sold the house. It wasn't just because of your entitled plan. It's because you already started moving in without permission. The table went silent. 3 weeks ago, I continued, my neighbor, Mrs. Brennan, called me. She said she'd seen people going in and out of my house while I was at work. I checked under my doormat. The spare key I kept there for emergencies was gone, so I had security cameras installed. I pulled up the video app on my phone. Would you like to see what I found? I pressed play on the first video. The timestamp showed it was from 3 weeks ago, 2 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon. The video clearly showed Brandon and Dad walking up to my front door. Dad pulled out a key, and they went inside like they owned the place. Mom's face went pale. The crying stopped instantly. I swiped to the next video. This one had audio. They were in my living room, Brandon measuring the walls with a tape measure. I'm going to put my big screen TV here, he said on the video, and my gaming setup over there. She won't mind once she sees how good it looks. Dad's voice came through clearly. Your mother's right. Althea always comes around eventually. She likes to put up a fight, but she does what the family needs. Mom's voice chimed in from somewhere off camera. Make sure you check the master bedroom. That's going to be yours. Althea can take the smaller room when she visits. I let that sink in for a moment before swiping to another clip. This one showed Brandon in my bedroom, going through my dresser drawers, laughing as he held up an old photo album. Dad stood in the doorway, looking uncomfortable, but saying nothing. The final clip showed them in my garage. Brandon's furniture was stacked along the wall. Boxes with his name on them filled half the space. He'd already started moving in, assuming I'd have no choice but to accept it. Carol's hand covered her mouth. Oh my God. Mason and his wife looked horrified. But Mom, Dad, and Brandon just looked caught. Dad tried to recover first. We're family. We don't need permission to enter each other's homes. Actually, I said, putting my phone away, you do. It's called trespassing. And going through my personal belongings without permission is a violation of privacy. I have every one of these videos saved to the cloud, along with timestamps and dates. Brandon's face twisted with anger. You're really going to call the cops on your own family? You really broke into my house and planned to steal it out from under me? It's not stealing, Mom insisted, her victim act completely abandoned now. We were helping you see reason. By forging my signature and moving Brandon in without telling me, Dad stood up, trying to use his height to intimidate me. This has gone far enough, Althea. You're being dramatic and selfish. Brandon needs help. You have the means to help him. That's what family does. I've been helping this family my entire life. I've lent money that was never repaid. I've hosted every holiday dinner for the past 5 years. I've driven across town at midnight when Brandon got stranded because he spent his gas money at a bar. I've covered his share of group gifts. I've made excuses for him to friends and employers. When does it end? It ends when you stop being so self-centered, Brandon spat. The room fell silent. Even Dad looked shocked by that statement. Carol stood up. That's enough, Brandon. She's the only one in this family who isn't self-centered. Stay out of this, Mom snapped at her sister. No, Carol said firmly. I've stayed out of it for too long. I've watched you favor Brandon since he was born. I've watched you dismiss Althea's accomplishments and make excuses for Brandon's failures. I knew this plan was wrong, and I should have warned Althea immediately. Mom's face flushed with anger. You have no idea what it's like raising children. I raised 3 kids who are all independent, employed, and haven't stolen from their siblings, Carol shot back. So I think I have some idea. Brandon slammed his fist on the table again. Everyone shut up! This is about me needing a place to live. Althea has a house. She should share it. End of story. I had a house, I corrected. Past tense. The new owners take possession next week. Brandon's face went from red to purple. You can't do this to me. I already did. Then you need to buy it back. I actually laughed. Buy back my own house because you decided you're entitled to it? Brandon, listen to yourself. He stood up so fast his chair fell backward. You don't understand. I need that house. The desperation in his voice made everyone pause. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was panic. Why? I asked. Why do you need my house so badly that you'd break in and start moving in without permission? Brandon looked at Mom and Dad. Some silent communication passed between them. Then Brandon exploded. Because I owe $30,000 to people who are going to hurt me if I don't pay them back. There. Are you happy? I have gambling debts to dangerous people, and I need somewhere to hide where they can't find me easily. Your house is in a different neighborhood under your name. They'd never look there. And I figured you'd help me pay off the debt because that's what family does. The room went completely silent. Even the air seemed to stop moving. Mason was the first to speak. You were going to put Althea in danger by hiding from loan sharks in her house without telling her? They're not loan sharks, Brandon muttered. Just guys I play poker with. Who threatened you? I said. Over $30,000. Mom started crying again, real tears this time. We've been so worried about him, Althea. These men called the house. They know where we live. We had to get Brandon somewhere safe. So you decided my house was the perfect hiding spot, I said slowly, without asking me, without warning me that dangerous people might come looking for him. You were going to let me walk into that situation blind. Dad at least had the decency to look ashamed. We thought once you knew the whole story, you'd understand. Understand that you were willing to put me at risk to save Brandon from his own bad choices? Brandon pointed at me accusingly. You could help me pay it off. You make good money. You could take out a loan or use your savings. $30,000 is nothing to you. $30,000 is a year of mortgage payments. It's not nothing to anyone. But you'd let your brother get hurt over money? I looked at him for a long moment. You made a choice to gamble money you didn't have. You made a choice to borrow from dangerous people. You made a choice to keep gambling even when you couldn't pay them back. Those were your choices, Brandon, not mine. So, you're just going to abandon me? His voice cracked. I'm not abandoning you. I'm refusing to be dragged into a crisis you created. There's a difference. Mom stood up, her face pleading. Althea, please, he's your brother. You can't just turn your back on family. I looked around the table at each of them. Family didn't turn their backs on me when Tyler left. Oh, wait, you did. Family didn't help when I had surgery last year and needed rides to appointments. Oh, right, none of you showed up. Family didn't celebrate when I got my promotion. Actually, you forgot to even call. But now, when Brandon needs something, suddenly family means everything. That's not fair, Dad said weakly. What's not fair is expecting me to set myself on fire to keep Brandon warm. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door. Mom followed me, still crying. Please don't leave like this. We can work something out. I turned to face her. There's nothing to work out, Mom. You all made your choices. You chose to lie to me, forge my signature, break into my house, and plan to use me as a shield for Brandon's gambling debts, without my knowledge or consent. Those were your choices. Now I'm making mine. Brandon appeared behind Mom, his face desperate. Althea, please. You don't understand what these guys are like. They've already threatened to break my legs. They know where Mom and Dad live. I can't stay here. That's terrible, Brandon, and I'm sorry you're in that situation. But it's not my responsibility to fix it. How can you be so cold? I'm not cold. I'm done. There's a difference. Dad joined them in the hallway. If something happens to your brother, you'll have to live with that. I felt something inside me finally break. The invisible thread that had tied me to this family, the one that had pulled tighter and tighter over the years, finally snapped. Let me tell you what I've lived with, I said, my voice shaking with emotion I could no longer contain. I've lived with being the responsible one who never got recognition. I've lived with watching Brandon get chance after chance while I had to fight for everything. I've lived with hosting holidays alone because it's expected. I've lived with being the family ATM. I've lived with being dismissed and overlooked and taken for granted. My voice rose. I've lived with Dad missing my college graduation because Brandon had a softball game. I've lived with Mom telling me my job isn't as important as Brandon's feelings. I've lived with being told I'm selfish for wanting boundaries. I've lived with 28 years of coming in second to a brother who has never once thanked me for anything. Tears were streaming down my face now, but I didn't care. When Tyler left me, I was devastated. I called you, Mom. You know what you said? You said maybe if I'd been a better wife, he wouldn't have left. When I had surgery and was scared, I asked if someone could come stay with me for a few days. You said Brandon needed you because he'd just lost another job and was depressed. When my car broke down 2 miles from your house at 11 at night, I called for help. Dad, you said you were too tired, and I should call a tow truck. Dad's face paled. I didn't realize. You didn't realize because you never asked. None of you ever ask how I'm doing, unless you need something from me. Brandon tried to interrupt. That's not true. We care about you. I laughed bitterly. You care about what I can do for you. There's a difference. Mom reached for my arm. Sweetheart, we love you. We just show it differently. No, I said, pulling away. You show favoritism. You show enabling. You show expectations. You don't show love. Love doesn't forge signatures. Love doesn't break into houses. Love doesn't put someone in danger without telling them. Love doesn't demand sacrifice while giving nothing in return. The hall went quiet except for Mom's sniffling. Carol appeared with Mason close behind. You should go, Carol said gently to me. You don't owe them any more explanations. I nodded, wiping my face. I gave them one last look. You have 48 hours to remove Brandon's things from my garage. The new owners take possession in 1 week, but I still have keys until then. If his stuff isn't gone in 48 hours, I'm having it thrown away. You can't do that, Brandon yelled. That's my property. Your property that you moved into my garage without permission. 48 hours. Patricia collapsed against the wall dramatically. Where are we supposed to store everything? We don't have room. That's not my problem to solve. Gerald's face hardened. You've become a very cruel person, Althea. No, Dad. I've become someone who finally values herself as much as I value everyone else. You just don't recognize me without a doormat under my feet. I walked out the door and didn't look back. The drive home to my new apartment was a blur. I'd already moved most of my belongings from the house. I'd been living in a temporary rental for the past 2 weeks during the closing process. My new place was a beautiful 2-bedroom condo in a different part of town. It was smaller than the house, but it was mine, and nobody knew the address yet. I spent that night crying. Not because I regretted my decision, but because I was grieving the family I'd always wanted, but never had. I was mourning the relationship with Brandon that could have been if he'd valued me as much as I'd valued him. I was letting go of the hope that my parents would someday see me for who I really was. 2 days later, I drove to the old house. Brandon's things were still in the garage, untouched. They'd called my bluff, assuming I wouldn't follow through. They were wrong. I called a junk removal service. 2 guys showed up with a truck within an hour. I showed them the garage and said to take everything. I documented the whole process with photos and videos, just in case. The garage was empty within 45 minutes. My phone exploded with text messages from Brandon. How could you throw away my stuff? Some of that was expensive. You're a horrible person. Mom is devastated because of you. I hope you're happy destroying this family. I blocked his number. Then I blocked Mom and Dad, too. I needed space, and they'd proven they wouldn't respect boundaries unless I enforced them. 1 week later, the new homeowners moved in without any issues. I met them briefly to hand over the keys and garage door openers. They were a young couple, expecting their first baby. They were excited and grateful. Watching them walk into that house, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. That house had represented so much hope when I bought it, but it had also become a symbol of everything wrong in my family. Selling it felt like freedom. I met with a lawyer the next day. Her name was Jennifer, and she came highly recommended. I brought all my evidence, the videos, the text messages, photos of the forged document, everything. Jennifer watched the security footage with a grim expression. This is clear trespassing, and the forged signature is document fraud. You could press charges. I don't want to send my family to jail, I said hesitantly. I just want them to leave me alone. Jennifer leaned back in her chair. I understand that impulse. But here's what I need you to understand. People like this don't stop unless they're forced to stop. If you don't set a legal boundary now, they'll keep pushing. I thought about it for a long moment. What if they escalate? Then you'll have this documentation to protect yourself. My advice? File a police report now. You don't have to press charges immediately, but get it on record. That way, if anything else happens, there's a paper trail. I filed the report that afternoon. The police took my statement, reviewed the evidence, and opened a case. They said they'd be in touch. 3 days later, I got a certified letter at my apartment. My hands shook as I opened it. It was a lawsuit. Brandon was suing me for emotional distress and financial damages. He claimed I'd promised him the house and destroyed his property. He was suing for $50,000. Gerald and Patricia were listed as witnesses who would testify that I'd verbally agreed to let Brandon move in. I called Jennifer immediately. She wasn't surprised. People get desperate when they lose control. This is a frivolous lawsuit, and we can get it dismissed. But it's going to be unpleasant. How unpleasant? You'll have to face them in court. They'll lie under oath. It's going to hurt. But you have evidence on your side. Truth matters. I hung up and sat in my empty condo, feeling overwhelmed. Part of me wanted to just give up, pay Brandon something to make this go away. But I knew that would only teach them they could bully me into compliance. No more, I whispered to myself. No more backing down. The next few weeks were a blur of legal preparation. Jennifer was thorough and relentless. We built a case that was airtight. Every piece of evidence was organized, documented, and verified. But I wasn't just fighting a legal battle. I was fighting for my own sense of self-worth. I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Sarah. She specialized in family trauma and boundary setting. Our first session, I cried for 45 minutes straight. It sounds like you've been trained to believe your worth comes from how useful you are to others, she observed gently. I never thought about it that way, but yeah. If I'm not helping, I'm selfish. That's a belief you were taught. It's not truth. Your worth is inherent. It doesn't require you to sacrifice yourself. Over the following weeks, Dr. Sarah helped me understand that I'd been conditioned from childhood to prioritize Brandon's needs over my own. My parents had created a dynamic where his failures were emergencies that required everyone's attention, while my successes were expected and unremarkable. You became the invisible child, she explained. The one who doesn't get attention unless there's a problem. So you stopped having problems. You became perfect, hoping that would earn you the love and recognition you deserved. But it didn't work, because the system was never designed to reward you. It was designed to maintain itself. That hit me hard. Meanwhile, I was rebuilding my life. I reconnected with Carol, who'd reached out several times since the dinner. We met for coffee one Saturday morning. I'm so sorry I didn't warn you, she said immediately. I felt terrible about it. Why didn't you? She sighed. Honestly? Fear. Your mother has a temper, and I've always tried to keep the peace. But watching what happened at that dinner made me realize keeping the peace just enables bad behavior. Did you know about the gambling? Not until that night. Patricia told me Brandon needed help getting back on his feet. She made it sound temporary and reasonable. I didn't know about the debts or the danger. What do you know about their financial situation? Carol hesitated. More than they want anyone to know. They took out a second mortgage 6 months ago. Patricia told me it was for home repairs, but I think now it was to pay off some of Brandon's debts. My stomach dropped. How much? $15,000. And they're struggling to make the payments. So they're at risk of losing the house? Yes. I think that's part of why they were so desperate to move Brandon into your place. They were planning to sell their house quietly and move in with him. Nobody was supposed to know they were in financial trouble. The pieces clicked into place. This wasn't just about helping Brandon. It was about saving themselves from the consequences of enabling him for 28 years. Carol reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You did the right thing. I know it doesn't feel good, but you did. I also reached out to Mason. We'd always been friendly, but not particularly close. He called me a few days after the dinner. That was the most messed up thing I've ever witnessed, he said. I had no idea they treated you like that. It's been subtle over the years. Little things that add up. Little things? Althea, they forged your signature and broke into your house. That's not little. I guess I got used to making excuses for them. Mason and his wife, Hannah, invited me over for dinner the following week. It was nice to be in a family setting that felt healthy. They asked about my life, my job, my interests. They didn't ask for anything. They just wanted to know me. You should come to our 4th of July barbecue this summer, Hannah said. We're doing it at our place this year. Fair warning, my family is loud and chaotic, but they're genuine. I'd love that, I said, and meant it. I also did some investigating on my own. I reached out to Derek, a mutual friend from high school who still ran in Brandon's social circle. We met for drinks. Derek, I need to know the truth about Brandon's situation. How bad is it really? He took a long drink before answering. Bad. He's been gambling online for 2 years. Started with small bets, but it escalated. Then he got into underground poker games. He's lost more than he's won, obviously. Do you know who he owes money to? A guy named Rick, who runs the poker games. Rick's not exactly a criminal, but he's not someone you want to owe money to either. He's got guys who collect debts, and they're not gentle about it. Has Brandon tried to get help? Gamblers Anonymous or anything? Derek laughed bitterly. Brandon doesn't think he has a problem. He thinks he's just had bad luck, and the next big win is coming. Classic gambler mentality. Has he borrowed money from other people? Derek looked uncomfortable. He borrowed $5,000 from me 2 years ago, said it was for rent. I never saw it again. I know he hit up at least 4 other people for similar amounts. None of us have been repaid. I'm sorry he did that to you. I'm sorry your family did what they did to you. I heard about the lawsuit. It's garbage. Everyone who knows you knows you'd never promise something and go back on it. The support from unexpected places helped, but I still had to face the legal battle ahead. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 2 months out. In the meantime, Jennifer filed a countersuit for the trespassing and document fraud. She also helped me get a restraining order against Brandon after he showed up at my work one afternoon. I was leaving the office when I saw him waiting by my car. I immediately called Jennifer, who told me to go back inside and call the police. Security escorted me to my car while Brandon shouted accusations from the parking lot edge. You destroyed my life. You're the reason I'm in danger. The police arrived and removed him. The incident helped our case for the restraining order, which was granted 3 days later. But the biggest revelation came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Brennan, my former neighbor, reached out through Facebook. She'd been following the situation through neighborhood gossip. I have something you need to see, she wrote. Can we meet? We met at a coffee shop near my old house. Mrs. Brennan brought a folder full of documents. I've lived next to your house for 20 years, she said. I knew the previous owners, and I watched you buy it and fix it up. You were a good neighbor. So when I saw what your family was doing, I started documenting. She showed me dated photos of Brandon's car parked in my driveway on multiple occasions. Photos of him and my parents entering the house. She'd even recorded a conversation she'd overheard from her yard, where Brandon was on the phone bragging about finally getting what he deserved. Why would you do all this? I asked, overwhelmed. Because I watched my own daughter get taken advantage of by her family for years. She finally cut them off, and it was the best thing she ever did. When I saw what was happening to you, I wanted to help. Nobody should have to fight their family alone. I started crying right there in the coffee shop. This woman barely knew me, but she'd stood up for me when my own family wouldn't. Thank you, I managed to say. This means everything. Jennifer was thrilled with the new evidence. This seals it. They can't claim it was a one-time mistake or misunderstanding when there's a pattern documented by an independent third party. But then came the twist that changed everything. Jennifer called me 2 days before the hearing. I need to tell you something. During discovery, we got access to your parents' financial records, as they're listed as witnesses. Althea, did you know you've been sending them money? I paused. Yeah. $800 a month for 3 years. Dad had a health scare, and they were struggling with bills. They asked me not to tell anyone because they were embarrassed. Did Brandon know? I never told him. I assumed Mom and Dad did. They didn't. And when this comes out in court, it's going to change the narrative significantly. You've been financially supporting your parents while they've been supporting Brandon's gambling. And Brandon had no idea you were keeping his parents afloat. How does this help us? It shows a pattern. You're the responsible one who actually helps without bragging about it. They're the ones who take and demand. It paints a very clear picture for the judge. I felt sick. I didn't give them that money for leverage. I did it because they needed help. I know. And that's exactly why it's powerful. You helped without conditions or expectations. They schemed and manipulated. The contrast couldn't be clearer. The week before the hearing was intense. Jennifer and I met multiple times to go over everything. She coached me on staying calm under questioning, not letting Brandon's lawyer provoke me, speaking clearly and sticking to facts. Meanwhile, Carol reached out again. She wanted to testify on my behalf. I asked if Mom had put pressure on her not to. She tried, Carol admitted. She called me crying, saying I was choosing sides and destroying the family. I told her I was choosing honesty. There's a difference. Won't this damage your relationship with her? It already is damaged. I've watched her treat you poorly for years and said nothing. That makes me complicit. I need to make this right. Mason also volunteered to provide a written statement about what he witnessed at the dinner. Hannah offered to testify about the threatening text messages I'd received, as I'd shown them to her when we had dinner. Derek agreed to testify about Brandon's gambling and the pattern of borrowing money without repaying it. He was risking Brandon's anger, but he said some things were more important than keeping problematic friendships. Mrs. Brennan's evidence was submitted formally. Her detailed documentation and dated photos created an irrefutable timeline. Jennifer built a case that was comprehensive and damning. Every angle was covered. Every claim Brandon made could be disproven with evidence. But I still felt anxious. These were my parents who would lie under oath for Brandon. My brother who would paint me as a villain. Facing them in court would be painful, regardless of the outcome. Dr. Sarah helped me prepare emotionally. We role-played difficult scenarios. She taught me grounding techniques for managing anxiety. Most importantly, she reminded me that their lies didn't define my truth. They can say whatever they want. The evidence speaks for itself. Your job is just to tell your truth and let the justice system do its work. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every moment from the past 3 months. Every accusation, every manipulation, every moment of doubt. But I also thought about the life I was building. The condo that felt like home. The healthier relationships with Carol, Mason, and Hannah. The therapy sessions that were helping me understand my worth. The job where I'd recently been promoted to senior project manager. I'd spent so much of my life trying to earn love from people who were incapable of giving it. Now, I was learning to give that love to myself. Around 3 a.m, I got up and made tea. I sat by the window of my condo, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Brandon was probably panicking about the hearing. Mom and Dad were probably rehearsing their lies. But I felt an unexpected sense of peace. Whatever happened tomorrow, I'd already won. I'd reclaimed my life. I'd set boundaries. I'd chosen myself. The lawsuit was just paperwork. The real victory was already mine. The courthouse was downtown, an imposing building with marble floors and high ceilings. I arrived early with Jennifer. She looked confident in her navy suit, carrying a briefcase full of evidence. "You ready?" she asked. "As ready as I'll ever be. Remember, stay calm. Answer only what's asked. Don't let them bait you into emotional responses." We entered the courtroom. It was smaller than I expected, more like a large office than the dramatic courtrooms you see on television. Brandon was already there with his lawyer, a young guy who looked fresh out of law school. Brandon wore a suit that was slightly too big, probably borrowed. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Mom and Dad arrived next. Mom wore a conservative dress and had her victim face on. Dad looked stern and uncomfortable. They sat behind Brandon's table, a united front against me. Carol came in and sat behind our table. She gave me an encouraging nod. Mason couldn't make it due to work, but his written statement was in our evidence folder. "All rise," the bailiff announced. Judge Margaret Thornton entered. She was a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense expression. The hearing began. Brandon's lawyer presented his case first. He painted a picture of a family agreement that Althea maliciously violated. He claimed Brandon had moved items to the house with permission, planning to move in as discussed. He said Althea's sudden sale of the house and disposal of Brandon's property caused severe emotional distress and financial loss. My client has suffered anxiety, depression, and ongoing harassment from his sister. He's asking for $50,000 in damages to compensate for the destroyed property and emotional harm. Judge Thornton looked unimpressed, but nodded for him to continue. Brandon's lawyer called Patricia to the stand first. She was sworn in, and immediately started with the tears. "Tell the court about the family meeting where this arrangement was discussed," the lawyer prompted. "It was in July," Patricia said. "We were all at our house for Sunday dinner. Althea agreed that Brandon could stay in her house temporarily while he got back on his feet. She said family should help family. Did she sign any documentation of this agreement?" "Yes, we drew up a family agreement." Althea signed it willingly. The lawyer presented the forged document as evidence. Jennifer made a note on her pad, but didn't object yet. "How did you feel when Althea suddenly sold the house without warning?" "Devastated," Patricia sobbed. "I couldn't believe she would go back on her word and hurt her brother like that. We raised her better than this." "Thank you. No further questions." Jennifer stood for cross-examination. She approached Patricia with a calm smile. "Mrs. Patterson, you testified the family meeting was in July. What specific date?" Patricia hesitated. "I don't recall the exact date. Was it early July or late July?" Mid-July, I think. "And you're certain Althea was there?" "Yes, absolutely." Jennifer pulled out a document. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit Exhibit A. These are Althea's work records showing she was at a mandatory 3-day conference in Dallas from July 12th through July 14th. Her credit card records show hotel and meal charges in Dallas during that time. She couldn't have been at a family dinner in mid-July." Patricia's face went red. "It might have been early August then. I get dates confused." "I see," Jennifer said. "Let's talk about the signature on this family agreement. Did you watch Althea sign it?" Patricia shifted uncomfortably. "I wasn't in the room when she signed it." "Who gave you the signed document?" "My husband brought it to me." "So you didn't actually see Althea sign it?" "No, but Gerald said she did." Jennifer let that hang in the air before continuing. "Mrs. Patterson, were you aware that Althea has been sending you $800 a month for the past 3 years?" Patricia's eyes went wide. I don't see how that's relevant." "Please answer the question. Did Althea send you monthly financial support?" "Yes," Patricia admitted quietly. "Did Brandon know about this?" "I don't think so. We didn't discuss it with him." "Why not?" Patricia had no answer. Jennifer returned to her seat. No further questions. Gerald was called next. His testimony matched Patricia's initially, but Jennifer's cross-examination was brutal. She got him to contradict his wife on multiple details. He said the meeting was in August, not July. He claimed 3 people were present. Patricia had said 5. He couldn't explain how Althea signed a document she was never shown. Then Jennifer dropped the bomb. "Mr. Patterson, is it true you and your wife took out a second mortgage on your home 6 months ago?" "That's private financial information," Gerald blustered. "Your Honor, we subpoenaed their financial records as their witnesses in this case." Jennifer handed documents to the judge. "These records show a home equity loan of $15,000, taken out 6 months ago. Can you explain what those funds were used for?" Gerald looked trapped. "Home repairs." "Really?" Jennifer pulled out more documents. "Because your son Brandon owed approximately $15,000 in gambling debts at that time. Did you use that loan to pay his debts?" Gerald's silence was answer enough. Brandon was called to the stand next. His testimony was emotional and angry. He painted himself as a victim of his sister's cruelty. But under Jennifer's questioning, he fell apart. She got him to admit he'd never paid rent anywhere in 5 years. Admit he had no current job or income. Admit he'd borrowed money from multiple friends and never repaid them. Admit he had gambling debts, Then she asked the question that changed everything. Mr. Patterson, were you aware your sister was sending your parents $800 every month? Brandon's face went blank. What? Althea has been financially supporting your parents for 3 years. $28,800 total. Did you know that? No, he said quietly. While you were living with them rent-free, your sister was helping pay their bills. Did you contribute anything to the household? I helped around the house. But no financial contribution? I didn't have money. Because you gambled it away? His lawyer objected, but the damage was done. When it was my turn, I was terrified but determined. Jennifer asked me straightforward questions. I explained the timeline clearly, presented the security footage, described finding Brandon's belongings in my garage. Brandon's lawyer tried to shake me on cross-examination. Isn't it true you've always been jealous of your brother? No, I answered calmly. I've always loved my brother. But love doesn't mean accepting abuse or manipulation. You make yourself out to be a victim, but you sold your house out of spite. I sold my house because it was my property and my decision. The fact that it inconvenienced my brother's unauthorized plans is not spite, it's consequence. He tried several more times to provoke me, but I stayed calm and factual. Jennifer had prepared me well. Mrs. Brennan testified via video call. Her detailed documentation and calm, clear testimony were powerful. She had no personal stake in the outcome. She was simply a neighbor who documented what she saw. Carol testified last. She was emotional, but honest. She described the phone call from Patricia, asking her to pressure me. She talked about years of watching my parents favor Brandon. She admitted her own complicity in staying silent. When all testimony was complete, Judge Thornton called a short recess. I sat with Jennifer, my heart pounding. You did great, she said. The evidence is overwhelming. When court resumed, Judge Thornton didn't waste time. I've reviewed all evidence and testimony. This is one of the clearest cases I've seen in my 20 years on the bench, Mr. Brandon Patterson's claim is not only without merit, it's based on a foundation of lies, forgery, and criminal trespass. She looked directly at Brandon. Your testimony that you had permission to move into your sister's house is directly contradicted by video evidence showing you entering without her knowledge. Your parents' testimony about a family meeting is contradicted by clear evidence your sister wasn't even in the state at the time they claim it occurred. She held up the forged document. This signature is clearly fraudulent. I'm referring this matter to the district attorney for potential prosecution. Brandon's face went white. Furthermore, the evidence shows a pattern of financial irresponsibility, manipulation, and entitlement. Miss Althea Patterson has been financially supporting her parents while they've been supporting your failures. She's been the responsible family member, and this lawsuit is your attempt to punish her for refusing to continue enabling your destructive behavior. Judge Thornton looked at me with something like respect. Miss Patterson, you are clearly the wronged party here. Not only am I dismissing your brother's lawsuit in its entirety, I'm awarding you damages for legal fees in the amount of $12,000. Additionally, I'm granting a permanent restraining order. Mr. Brandon Patterson is not to contact you or come within 500 feet of your residence or workplace. She looked at my parents. Mr. and Mrs. Patterson, you should be ashamed. You've enabled your son's destruction and attempted to sacrifice your daughter's well-being to cover your own failures as parents. I strongly suggest family counseling, though I doubt this family can be repaired. She banged her gavel. Case dismissed. The courthouse steps felt surreal. Jennifer shook my hand, smiling. That was a complete victory. Congratulations. Thank you. I managed. For everything. What you did took courage. A lot of people would have caved to family pressure. I almost did. Multiple times. But you didn't. That's what matters. I watched Brandon leave with Mom and Dad. None of them looked at me. They got into Dad's car and drove away. I wondered if I'd ever see them again. Probably not for a long time, and maybe that was okay. Carol hugged me tightly on the courthouse steps. I'm so proud of you. I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you could have, but I'm glad I could help. The immediate aftermath was strange. I felt relieved, but also hollow. I'd won the legal battle, but I'd lost my family. Even though they were toxic, they were still my family. Grief isn't logical. Dr. Sarah helped me process the complex emotions. You can grieve what you lost while still knowing it was necessary. Those feelings can coexist. Over the next few weeks, life slowly returned to normal. The restraining order meant Brandon couldn't contact me. He left town shortly after the hearing, according to Carol. Rumor was he moved to another state to escape his creditors. I didn't ask for details. 2 months after the hearing, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Mom, handwritten on nice stationery. Dear Althea, I don't know if you'll read this, but I need to write it anyway. I'm sorry. Those words are inadequate for what we put you through, but they're all I have. Your father and I have been going to counseling. Our therapist has helped us see patterns we couldn't see before. We failed you. We favored Brandon because his needs were louder, and we took your strength for granted. We assumed you didn't need us because you were capable of handling everything alone. But everyone needs their parents, and we weren't there. I was jealous of you. That's hard to admit. You accomplished everything I didn't. You went to college, built a career, bought a house. I dropped out when I got pregnant with you, and I always wondered what I could have been. Instead of being proud of you, I resented you. I'm so deeply ashamed of that. We're losing the house. We can't make the mortgage payments anymore. We're moving to a small apartment next month. Your father is working part-time at 67 to make ends meet. This is the consequence of enabling Brandon for so long. We haven't heard from Brandon in weeks. I don't know if he's safe or where he is. That's the hardest part. But I'm learning that we can't save someone who won't save themselves. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know I see what I did wrong. I understand if you never want to speak to us again. You deserve a family that values you, and we didn't do that. If you ever want to talk, we're here. But only if and when you're ready. Love. Mom. I read the letter 3 times. I cried through all 3 readings. I showed it to Dr. Sarah in our next session. What do you think I should do? That's entirely up to you. There's no right answer. You can respond, or you can take more time. You can set conditions, or you can maintain the distance. What feels right to you? I don't know. Part of me wants to believe they've changed. Part of me knows 1 letter doesn't erase 32 years. Both parts are valid. You don't have to decide today. I thought about it for weeks. Finally, I wrote back. My letter was shorter. Mom, thank you for your honesty. I appreciate the apology, and I hope counseling helps you both. I'm not ready to rebuild our relationship yet. I need more time to heal, but I'm not closing the door forever. If you continue therapy and truly work on yourselves, maybe someday we can try again. But there will be boundaries. No more enabling Brandon at my expense. No more lying or manipulation. No more taking me for granted. I've stopped the monthly payments. You need to learn to manage on your own. That's not cruelty. It's necessity. You won't grow if I keep fixing everything. I wish you well. I hope you find a way through this. When and if I'm ready to talk, I'll reach out. Althea. I mailed it and felt a weight lift. I'd acknowledge their apology without committing to immediate reconciliation. I'd set boundaries while leaving room for possible healing. It felt balanced. 6 months after the hearing, my life looked completely different. I'd settled into my condo and made it truly mine. Plants on the balcony, art on the walls, books on the shelves. It was small, but perfect. I'd gotten the promotion at work and was leading a major project. My team respected me, and I felt valued professionally. I'd built a chosen family. Carol and I had lunch every other week. Mason and Hannah included me in family gatherings. I'd made new friends through a book club I joined. These relationships were healthy, reciprocal, built on respect. I'd even started dating again. His name was Colin, and he worked in finance. We'd met through mutual friends. He was kind, stable, genuine. He knew about my family situation and never pressured me to reconcile before I was ready. He celebrated my boundaries instead of seeing them as obstacles. One Saturday evening, I hosted a small dinner party at my condo. Carol, Mason, and Hannah, Colin, and 2 friends from work. 7 people around my dining table, laughing and talking. I looked around at these faces and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. These people chose to be here. They wanted my company. They valued me for who I was, not what I could do for them. This, I realized, was family. Not the people you're born to, but the people who show up, who respect you, who celebrate your wins and support you through losses, who don't demand you set yourself on fire to keep them warm. As dinner wound down and people started leaving, Colin stayed to help clean up. "That was really nice," he said, drying dishes while I washed. "You have great people in your life." "I do now. It took me a while to find them. Or maybe to recognize you deserved them." I smiled. Maybe both. Later, sitting on my balcony with a cup of tea, I thought about the past year, the family dinner that changed everything, the lawsuit, the pain of cutting ties, the slow, difficult work of rebuilding. I thought about Brandon and wondered where he was. Part of me still hoped he'd get help and turn his life around. But I knew that was his journey, not mine. I couldn't save him. I could only save myself. I thought about Mom and Dad in their small apartment, facing the consequences of decades of enabling. Maybe they were changing. Maybe they weren't. Either way, it wasn't my responsibility to manage. I thought about the house I'd sold, the one Brandon thought he was entitled to. That house had represented so much. My independence, my hard work, my ability to build a life on my own terms. Selling it had felt like giving up something precious. But really, I'd been letting go of the idea that I needed to sacrifice my stability to prove my love. The house was just a house. My peace, my boundaries, my self-respect, those were what mattered. If someone had told me a year ago that I'd cut ties with most of my family, go to court against my brother, and build a completely new life, I wouldn't have believed them. The old Althea would have caved to pressure, would have let Brandon move in, would have paid his debts, would have sacrificed herself on the altar of family obligation. But that Althea was gone. The woman I'd become knew her worth. She set boundaries and enforced them. She chose her own well-being without apologizing for it. She built a life filled with people who valued her, not used her. Was it painful? Absolutely. Did I still have moments of doubt and grief? Of course. Would I do it all again? Yes. 1,000 times yes. Because at the end of the day, the only person you have to live with forever is yourself. And I'd finally learned to be someone I could live with, someone I could respect, someone I could love. The house wasn't the surprise I gave Brandon that night at dinner. The surprise was discovering I had a backbone, that I could say no, that I could protect myself, that I could survive without their approval. That was the real surprise. And it changed everything. I finished my tea and went inside. Tomorrow was Sunday. Colin and I were going hiking. Carol was coming over for brunch next week. Mason had invited me to his daughter's birthday party. My work project was ahead of schedule. My therapist appointment was on Tuesday. My life was full and good and mine. As I got ready for bed, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at me looked different than she had a year ago. Older maybe, but also stronger. More certain, more at peace. I'd spent 32 years trying to earn love from people who were incapable of giving it freely. Now I was learning to give that love to myself. And it turned out that was the only love I really needed. Everything else was just extra. Beautiful, wonderful extra. But not necessary for my survival or my worth. I smiled at my reflection. Good night, Althea. You did good. And I meant it. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is disappoint people who never truly valued you. Real love doesn't demand sacrifice at the cost of your own well-being. Boundaries aren't walls keeping people out. They're bridges to healthier relationships. I learned that protecting my peace wasn't selfish. It was necessary. I learned that sometimes you have to walk away from the family you were born into to find the family you deserve. Most importantly, I learned that my worth was never tied to how much I could give, how much I could endure, or how small I could make myself to fit into someone else's expectations. I was enough, exactly as I was. The house was just a house, but my freedom, my dignity, my self-respect, those were priceless, and I would never give them away again. Have you ever had to set a difficult boundary with family? How did you find the courage to choose yourself? I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories about finding strength in difficult situations. Share this with someone who might need to hear it today. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, you are worthy of respect, boundaries, and love that doesn't require you to sacrifice yourself. Take care of yourselves out there, and I'll see you in the next one.